Now, one of the reasons why Selenium can be a little bit confusing if you've done a little bit of research on Selenium or tried to get started and you didn't know where to get started is because of the history. And understanding this history of Selenium, I think, clears things up a little bit so that you understand why you're seeing different versions of Selenium and different technologies being used to drive Selenium. So Selenium started out as a ThoughtWorks project. A couple of guys at ThoughtWorks came up with this idea of creating a framework to do some automated testing. And this was around 2004. So Selenium has been out for a while. And this version of Selenium, you can see it was called Selenium 1, or actually it was called Selenium RC, but we refer to it now as Selenium 1, and that just means Selenium Remote Control. And this idea was that you would have a Selenium client and you'd have a Selenium server. And the Selenium client would send commands to the server, and the server would use JavaScript to drive the browser. So it didn't hook directly into any of the browser APIs. It pretty much sent the same JavaScript to any browsers that it automated, and it used that JavaScript engine to drive the browsers. Now, there was a competing technology around this time called Webdriver, and Webdriver had a different philosophy in the automation of the browsers. It didn't use JavaScript. What it did was it got as close to the metal, as close to the native browser API as possible. So it drove the different browsers with their automation APIs. You may have done something like what Webdriver did before if you've ever written a COM object to automate IE or used the IE COM object to automate the browser. It's basically the same way that Webdriver is interacting. Well, Selenium was duplicating that functionality. These were competing technologies, but the Webdriver way was a little bit more superior, but Selenium presented a pretty good API. So what ended up happening is those two projects merged together, and that's where we have the new Selenium or Selenium 2. So when you hear of Selenium RC, that's Selenium 1, that's the first version, and it's completely different than the new version of Selenium, which now uses the same technique as Webdriver. It's basically merged with Webdriver. So then Selenium 2 has been in beta for quite a while, but has now been released. And so that's now the current version of Selenium, and it uses that Webdriver technology.